It's been so long I didn't see you on mine. You change a lot, you look a different guy. I can't stop thinking about you since last night.
Hello, YouTube. I am super grateful that you clicked on this video. My entire purpose with having this channel is so that I can find a community to talk to about the books I'm reading. You know, sometimes when you read books, you can feel a little isolated because you don't know anybody that's reading what you're reading, right? So you just get to keep all your thoughts to yourself. And I'm hoping that this YouTube channel gives me more of a community where I can talk to people about these books that I'm reading who have also read them or are reading them, etc. So I'm very grateful that you clicked on this video. So we're getting into the Chronicles of Narnia. I read these books as a child. I might have been 8 or 9. I'm in like third, fourth grade, something like that. But after reading these first 5 chapters, I can 100% tell you I don't remember anything that I'm reading. I don't remember the people or the names or the places. I'm glad you're here to come along. Let's get into the first chapter, and I think C.S. Lewis takes 1 or 2 paragraphs to essentially set the scene. And the book was copywritten in 1955, and the narrator lets us know that this is a story that happened when your grandparents were children, back when Sherlock Holmes still lived on Baker Street. I know that Sherlock Holmes was very prolific in the 1890s. But if you're a grandfather or grandmother in 1955, let's say you're 65 years old. I don't know, maybe 70. If you're 65 and this story is happening to you when you're a child, let's just call that 10 years old, easy math. 65 years old minus 10 years old leaves you with 55 years, which goes from 1955 back to 1900. So hypothetically, this story is happening anywhere in the 1890s or right around the turn of the century. Anyway, we're introduced to the 2 children, Polly and Diggory. The story is taking place in London, and I guess they live in a row of, in my mind, townhomes. So like Polly lives here, Diggory lives here, there's an empty townhome here. And I think what I'm gathering is that they all share walls. So it's almost like an apartment complex, but townhomes. Polly seems to have always lived there, but Diggory has recently come to London to stay with his aunt and uncle. And Diggory is like super upset about this. They were living in the country. He had lots of land, freedom, animals. I think he mentioned he had a pet pony. And now he has to live in a city. And I think he's more upset about change than anything else, you know? So that's how the kids meet and they bond. And the kids become fast friends. And they do a lot of indoor exploring because it's a very cold summer, apparently. And I guess in Polly's house, up on the second, third floor, near the attic, whatever, um, there's a way for her to get into like this hidden area that leads to a tunnel, and she's turned this like hidden cove area into almost like a kid's fort, her little space. And this tunnel, I'm led to believe, traverses atop all of the townhomes, like almost under the roofs across everything. Um, and the kids are really interested in this like empty townhome at the end. So they want to traverse this tunnel, go across all the rafters in the attic or whatever, and get to this empty townhome and do some exploring. Why is it empty? What's in there? Ooh. And the kids do some math, and kids being kids, the math doesn't math, and they get to a door, what they think is the empty townhome, and they open the door, and it's not empty at all. You know, it is a very, what I think of as like a dream library. I would love this room in my house. And who's in there in front of the fire? Uncle Andrew. And Uncle Andrew is real creepy, trying to get the kids to stay. He's been waiting for children just like them, you know. It's like what's he gonna do to them? It's like super not okay. But the kids kind of talk their way out of it. It's kind of like not great plot writing there, but the kids talk their way out of it. And Uncle Andrew's like, "Well, I should give you a gift before you go." And he's got these rings over on the table, and he tells Polly she can have a yellow ring. So Polly goes over. She picks up one of the yellow rings, and poof, she's gone, vanishes into thin air. And that's how that first chapter ends. I'm not hooked in this story at the end of the first chapter, but I am hooked by the writing style. C.S. Lewis has a very advanced rhetorical style. A lot of the times when you're reading fantasy books, the authors are very descriptive, very long-winded. They take their time explaining the world. You get like chapters and chapters and chapters of just world building, living in the main character's shoes, getting to know characters, and there's no conflict. Nothing happens, right? Maybe some like spooky weird oddities happen, but there's no conflict yet. There's just enough stuff to keep you interested. But within 5 pages, within 2 pages even, C.S. Lewis has set up some oddities and conflict. And the impetus for where this story is going is given to you at the end of like page 10. Boom, done. Um, Also, C.S. Lewis is not long winded. He's very concise. Very concise. He'll have a sentence of 5 words that tells you everything you need to know about Diggory. And you have to go reread the sentence to really unpack that. The amount of information he's able to use with an amazing economy of language is astounding. Very cool. Very cool. And it sucks you into chapter 2. So I think chapter 2 is called Diggory and His Uncle, and it picks up after Polly has vanished. Understandably, Diggory is like, what the hell, Uncle Andrew? What the F is going on? What are those rings? What is happening? We get this whole history. This is a pretty transparent info dump on C.S. Lewis's part, because instead of Uncle Andrew just kind of telling Diggory that, hey, the rings can help you travel to different worlds, he has to give him this whole backstory of where, like, what the rings are made out of and the thing that made the rings. Where did that come from and who had it and why and blah, blah, blah. So you get the story of Mrs. LeFay. Mrs. LeFay was Uncle Andrew's godmother, and she had this box of magic dust, blah, 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 blah. Uncle Andrew inherits it. Over the years, Uncle Andrew became a magician, which doesn't mean he does sleight of hand. It means he has magic. Mrs. LeFay, the godmother, has fairy blood. She's a descendant of the fairies, and the Fae is a hardcore mythology over in Britain, especially Ireland, I believe, maybe Scotland, which is also cool because her last name, LeFay, has the word Fae in it. It's like good wordplay. And the box of dust seems to come from Atlantis, which predates like everything we know. And of course, you have the modern world magic with Uncle Andrew becoming a magician. So C.S. Lewis is like ingeniously connected some dots here, right? He's taken our modern world magic that you and I would be very familiar with, and he's connected it to the mythology of the fairy realm, and he's connected that to the legend of the lost city of Atlantis. And lastly, he's connected those things to the concept of parallel universes or a multi-world theory. Lots of world building here. One last thought I kind of had here is what's up with magic rings, man? Like, the Lord of the Rings is completely based around the concept of magic rings, and then C.S. Lewis has these magic rings in his book that are kind of the impetus for the magic system and conflict of the series. And obviously, J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were friends, contemporaries, lived in the same area, country. So was this like thing in Britain? Was this a thing of the 1930s, 40s, 50s? Like, what's up with the magic rings? I don't know. If you know, comment below. Let me know. Anyway, um, I'm not hooked on the plot yet at the end of chapter two, but I am hooked on the metaphysics and the magic system, and I want to learn more. I want to know. Um, so the end of chapter two is essentially Uncle Andrew setting up that the yellow rings take you to another world, and the green rings bring you back. Polly only has a yellow ring, no green rings, which means she has no way to get back. So Diggory has to go after her. So when we get into chapter three, I think chapter three is called "The Wood Between the Worlds." I mean, it's a no-brainer that Diggory has a great friendship and wants to go after his friend. Uncle Andrew sets him up with the green rings in his right pocket and gives him a yellow ring. Blah blah blah. And Diggory travels to the other world, and he travels where there's nothing above him, nothing below him, um, no water, no air, no nothing. I think there's blackness below him and green light above him, and whatever. Anyways, he swims. So this is hard because there's absolutely nothing. So how do I ascribe a verb here? He Diggory goes upward. Anyways, his head breaks the surface of water, and he can breathe some air, and he steps out of a pool of water, like I'm thinking of it as a very small pond, like a very small pond, into an amazing wood. So lots of trees, beautiful, serene, quiet. I think they describe it as being so serene, peaceful, and quiet that you can hear the trees grow. So the wood between the worlds is this amazing wooded forest, like I mentioned. And instead of just the one small pond of water where they came from, there's lots of different ponds of water all around. Ostensibly, this is like gateways to other worlds. Before I go on, I'm struck by two things with the metaphysics here. This wood he's in, we end up learning is more like a place in between worlds. And it's compared to that tunnel that the kids were exploring earlier, meaning it's not in a house, it's not in a world, but it connects all of the houses, it connects all of the worlds. So you can think of it as limbo. They went to limbo in order to reach limbo. And I just thought that was very meta. Anyway, instead of going straight home, I mean, why would you want to go straight back to Uncle Andrew? That dude is creepy, right? The kids decide they kind of want to mess around with the rings and mess around with the wood between the worlds. They're putting on the yellow rings and the green rings, and they're jumping into water, and they're trying to figure out how this stuff works. And um, the omniscient narrator kind of clues us in to the fact that Uncle Andrew had no idea what he was messing with. The pools or ponds of water are gateways to other worlds, and the dust was made from stuff in this wood between the worlds. I'm thinking of it as sawdust, very fine sawdust that was made from the trees. And essentially, there's two different kinds of dusts. One type of dust wants to be in the world between the wood between the worlds, and the other type of dust wants to leave the wood between the worlds. And Uncle Andrew was able to discern these two different forces, and so the yellow rings are made with the dust that wants to be in the wood between the worlds, and it will always take you there. The green rings don't take you back to Polly and Diggory's world. The green rings are made out of dust that does not want to be in the wood between the worlds, and so the green rings will take you to any other world. You just have to select the gateway to get there. And I have a question here. How do the wood between the worlds is kind of described as peaceful, serene, perfect, no strife, no conflict. But very clearly, there's two types of dust. And if the dust is made from the trees, that means the trees have conflicting urges to be and to not be in the wood between the worlds. And so, how is it so perfect? So, after experimenting with the rings and the pools and whatever, we get into chapter 4 where they put on the green rings and they jump into a particular pool and they're transported to an actual new world. They're in a courtyard in a deserted city. There's great buildings on all four sides of the courtyard. It's a very abandoned city. There's no insects, there's no sounds. The buildings look like they're decaying and falling apart. The windows are empty and black. The sun on the horizon is low to the horizon and is very large and it's very red, which kind of gives the impression that the sun is going towards being like a red giant or whatever before it implodes and dies. So it's a very ancient world, but it gives off the feeling of almost like medieval, maybe. And because of the great empty windows and the kids being scared of being watched, I can't help but be reminded of the Wheel of Time, a city called Shadar Lagoth or Eridol. I wonder if Robert Jordan got some inspiration from this very briefly. Anyhow, instead of just going back, like Polly wants to go back, but Diggory is all hell bent on exploring. So they start walking through these buildings, just empty chambers, long hallways. They go out to some terraces and they can see that some bridges are falling and other terraces don't have any supports anymore and things are crumbling and the walls are falling apart. But their exploring leads them to a set of doors that are golden, and of course one of them is left ajar. And kids being kids, they got to go in and check it out, you know. So they go in, and there are rows of seating. I'm not sure if they're individual chairs or if they're more like pews, whatever. But one's on the left, one's on the right, and there's an empty aisleway down the center. And these seats are filled with people. The people are wearing finery. They're all wearing some type of crown or tiara and jewels. They're very regal. They seem taller than normal. They seem very lithe. The kids walk through them and notice that the none of the people are alive. They look like the most perfect wax replicas of people. And the kids notice that the those nearest them seem to be wise, kind, good people, and as they keep going forward, the people progress forward towards being full of cruelty and despair. I think I find that interesting. And of course, then there's one woman that's kind of set off on her own at the end of the people, and she seems to be, Diggory says, the most beautiful. And I guess Polly is like, I didn't think much of her. So um, that's funny. I'm not sure if that's like foreshadowing for some jealousy, or if that's foreshadowing to kind of show that Polly is a better judge of people and Diggory is just a boy. Anyhow, in the center of this room is a little arch that's holding a bell, and next to it is a hammer, and the bell and the hammer are golden. And there's a little poem there that essentially says to strike the bell and deal with the danger, and if you don't, you'll forever wonder what if. And Polly's all like, let's not do this shit. And Diggory is like, I want to do this shit. Um, Very typical girl with her head on her shoulders and boy that has no idea what's going on. They have a little tussle, and Diggory physically subdues Polly. That's interesting. I'm kind of led to believe here that Diggory was acting off of an enchantment in the room, and that wasn't actually him. Because during their little tussle and their little verbal back and forth, Diggory almost seems to turn into his Uncle Andrew. It's very odd. His personality shifts and his physical behavior shifts. And I'm wondering if there is some type of enchantment on the room or the bell and the hammer that is going to act on people and get them to hit the bell. Maybe, I don't know. But essentially, after Diggory subdues Polly, he takes the hammer and he strikes the bell. The bell has a nice sweet sound, but instead of resonating and fading, it resonates and then swells and becomes so loud that the room starts falling apart. The ceiling collapses, right? I like how, like, when you read a lot of fantasy books, there seems to be a lot of rationality that is given to the main characters to help describe their actions. It's rooted in emotion, or it's rooted in friendship, or it's rooted in logic, it's rooted in evil human nature or good human nature, or there's another force that essentially manipulates others. So think of like Gandalf getting um, Bilbo or Frodo to go on their journeys. Like there's a little bit of manipulation there. It's not evil manipulation, but it's manipulation. But here, C.S. Lewis isn't using any of that. He doesn't need to waste words on any of it. It is easily insinuated that the children are, like Diggory and Polly, are acting this way because they're children, and they lack developed empathy, and they lack developed logic and rationality, and it's just childlike curiosity. But what this does is it's like it cuts the chapters in half. There's a lot less explanation that needs to happen, and I think that that is an amazing rhetorical device. And we just I'm just eating it up. Like, sure, that's exactly what would happen. Why would a child think this is dangerous? Let's not do that. Like very, very, very good writing. But after that roof implodes, it takes us into chapter five. That kind of solo woman that was sitting off by herself that Diggory thought was very beautiful. She wakes up. Heyo, she wakes up. This woman stands up. She's like 7 feet tall, and she's, according to Diggory, or at least through the omniscient narrator who knows what Diggory thinks, beautiful. She recognizes that the room is collapsing and that everybody's in danger. So she takes the children's hands and starts leading them out of the room, away to safety. And it's interesting. We don't get any info dumps from this woman. We don't get any info dumps from Polly and Diggory. The omniscient narrator just sort of switches and tells us details that it knows. Okay. This woman is a queen, and the children are suddenly in a palace, and the queen's name is Jadis. Jadis takes them by the hand and leads them through the palace until she arrives at a set of double doors that are ebony. Anyway, she drops their hands and she does magic and just pulverizes the doors, like disintegrates them. And they go out onto a terrace overlooking an enormous city. That's where the queen starts giving us some backstory and information about herself. So the city is huge. It's called Charn. If I'm being honest with you, it's a stupid name for a city. And Queen Jadis essentially says that she's the last queen, period, and tells them that there was a war long ago. And it sounds like it was a civil war. It seems to be a war between Jadis and her sister. Jadis tells the children that she is the last queen, but then also says that her sister would not relinquish the throne to her. So does that mean that her sister was queen and Jadis like wanted to be queen? But it's odd because Jadis then talks about how she lived in this palace, which gives the impression that she was queen. But if she was queen, why would her sister not relinquish the throne? Unless it's like Queen Jadis's dad died or something, and the secession was occurring, and there was strife, and the sisters couldn't come to an agreement there. I'm not really sure. Either way, there's a civil war. I guess the war, they agreed not to use magic during the war, and the war lasted for like 3 years or something. There at the end, the final battle happened in the city of Charn itself, and it lasted for 3 days or whatever. And Queen Jadis's army was decimated to a man, and Queen Jadis's sister and the army started marching on the palace. And we get this backstory about magic, and there's like a very like one ring to rule them all type magic spell called the deplorable word. The deplorable word, when spoken with the right ceremonies and incantations and whatever, will kill every single living thing in the world except for you. Um, Deus Ex Machina, if ever there was one, you know what I mean? Anyways, so Jadis waits for the sister and the army to be pretty close so that Jadis can look her sister in the eye, speak the deplorable word, and kill everybody and everything. So that explains why the city is uninhabited and in disrepair, blah, blah, blah. It's been 1,000 years that Queen Jadis has been frozen in the quote, Hall of Images. So I guess all of those people in that hall weren't real people, they were images of Queen Jadis's ancestors. That's a very interesting hall, and there's no point to it at the moment. But why would we be given this information if it's not going to come up later for some reason? I don't know, just out of curiosity. And it becomes very evident that like Queen Jadis doesn't have a world to rule anymore, so she has been awakened in order to be taken back to another world where she's going to rule. And Diggory and Polly are all of a sudden like connecting some dots that I also was connecting in my head. Was Queen Jadis, if she was really that power hungry that she was willing to kill everybody, was she in the right in this little civil war? Maybe the sister was in the right. I don't know. But obviously, Queen Jadis is power hungry, maniacal, like, not necessarily a good person. And Polly and Diggory are like, you don't want to come back to our world. I don't want you to come back to our world. This is no bueno. Queen Jadis has none of it, but the kids can't get to their yellow rings because she's holding their hands, blah, blah, blah. Queen Jadis drops their hands and grabs their hair instead, almost in like a intro to torture kind of a thing. And in that moment, they plunge their hands in their pockets and grab their yellow rings, and poof, they're gone. They escape. Like, huge sigh of relief. The story got good, y'all. It's so good. This is fascinating. And, like, what happens next? Does Queen Jadis make it back to their, like, our mortal realm and start wreaking havoc, and like, that's what has to be solved? Or do the kids go back and the main conflict is with Uncle Andrew? Do the kids never go back? They go back to the wood between the worlds and they pick a different pool, like the one for Narnia, maybe? I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what happens next. Okay, so those are the first 5 chapters. Um, and at the end of chapter 5, I'm hooked. Hook, line, and sinker. We're going to go read the next chapters. I guess my final thoughts here is I am very impressed with the different writing style from C.S. Lewis, his economy of language, the lack of a lot of rhetorical devices that a lot of fantasy employs, and world building, detail, rationale for behavior, stuff like that. And I'm blown away that this is a story written for children, but I think it's actually a story written for adults. Um, Very similar to how The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien was a story written for children, but is actually a story written for adults. And so let's dive into that a little bit. Are we getting stupider as a society? Back in the 1940s and 50s, were kids just smarter on a whole other reading level? Were these actually books for children? Because I don't think that a lot of what I'm reading would be picked up on by kids today. I mean, very clearly, I read it and I don't remember it. And I remember hating The Hobbit when I was a kid, loving it when I got into college. So, was it a children's book meant for adults? Or is our society deprecating and our children are just not on the same reading level that they once were. Hmm. Anyhow, very interesting to get back into this. So, do me a favor, like this video if you like it, whatever. If you want to follow along with me, give it a subscribe. I might upload one, maybe two videos a week. We'll see what my life schedule is like, but definitely one video a week. And I'm wondering if my thoughts are on the same path as yours. So leave me some comments. What do you think of the writing style here? What do you think of the magic system and world building where we connect the legend of Atlantis to the mythology of the Fae, to magicians having actual magic, to the ability to travel between worlds with like parallel universes, almost like an MCU type of thing? When were you hooked by this story? Were you hooked when they opened that door to Uncle Andrew's study? Or were you hooked when Polly disappeared? Or were you hooked when the kids escaped Jadis like me? When were you hooked by this story? I would love to know your thoughts. I guess I need to go read the next chapters. Thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Drink some coffee, read some books, have a good time. I'll see you in the next one.
It's been so long I didn't see you on mine. You change a lot, you look a different guy. I can't stop thinking about you since last night.